are these people?
Let's talk about what's happening in Syria, Care Bear. Not good things, I will admit. But I brought this story from MintPress. Jessica Buxbaum. Israel isn't leaving Syria. Settlement plans signal a permanent land grab, which we'll get into how permanent in a bit. But this was written on the 22nd. So things have happened even in the last like 3 days, you know, not even, right? So it's now what, the 6th? So she writes, Israel wasted no time following the abrupt collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria. Within hours of Assad's fall on December 8th, Israel forces seized the buffer zone separating the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights from the rest of Syria. They raised Israel's flag atop Mount Hermon. More than a month later, Israeli troops remained stationed in the UN-patrolled area, raiding government buildings and summoning residents for questioning, all the while alleging its presence is necessary to secure Israel's border as the balance of power shifts in Syria. Yet, a combination of soldier and settler actions as of late question whether Israel has long-term plans for Syria. I'm betting they do. The same day as Assad's ousting and Israeli invasion, Yuri Safan, an Israeli settler movement to reoccupy southern Lebanon, wrote on their blog, "In Syria too, we must go at least 10 kilometers, approximately 6 miles deep, and reclaim the entire Hermon range. Jewish settlement will ensure Israeli control for generations." The Nasrallah settler movement, which has been active in advocating for Israeli resettlement of Gaza, also called for occupying Syria for the sake of security. The answer to the chaos in Syria, taking territory in Jewish settlement, Nasrallah wrote on Facebook on December 8th, "Whoever still thinks it's possible to leave our fate in the hands of a foreign actor forsakes Israel's security." The post included a biblical map showing Israel's territory, including all of Lebanon and most of Syria and Iraq. While some settlers stressed the need to establish settlements to safeguard security, others were more transparent with their rationale. For instance, Yaakov Sokol, a member of Yuri Safan, wrote in an op-ed on the Israeli right-wing news website Arutz Sheva. The territories in question are part of the land of Israel and are full of Jewish heritage sites. We have every right to open these territories and annex them to the state of Israel. This is not about taking over the land of another people, but rather taking over a territory that originally belonged to us. These are our territories by right, and to ensure our continued existence in these territories for the distant future, a Jewish settlement should be established on the ruins of the Arab villages. So, another social media post has expressed enthusiasm over further Israeli occupation of Syria. So here's them planting the flag on Mount Hermon, right? So My Israel, which describes itself as a Zionist Israeli online movement, posted images of soldiers raising the Israeli flag on Mount Hermon with the caption, "Syria, the nation of Israel lives," in Hebrew. So a video of Orthodox Jews praying in what the alleged was the Syrian village of Haider circulated online. According to Israeli news site The Hottest Place in Hell, the video was shared in Yuri Safan's WhatsApp group with members confused about how the activists entered a closed military area. One Yuri Safan member wrote that they probably entered with the help of one of the soldiers in the area. It happens all the time. They wouldn't have entered without the cooperation of soldiers. The website also detailed how the ideology of Messianic soldiers had infiltrating Israeli army. Footage of reservists carrying a Torah scroll into the post they were staying at in Syria went viral across Israeli social media. Speaking to The Hottest Place in Hell, one soldier said how after they entered Syria, another soldier said on the radio that he was very excited that we were here and signed off with "Blessed are you," expanding Israeli borders. There is no gap that religion is not pushed into, but in Syria, it is simply an expression of our foothold here, the anonymous soldier told The Hottest Place in Hell. In 2024, speculation began to abound on whether Israel's war goal wasn't just eliminating Hamas, but also included establishing an empire in the Middle East as Israeli forces headed into Lebanon and now Syria. Now, Ms. Buxbaum, I know you know it was well before 2024 that people were worried about Greater Israel, but I'll let it slide this time. Under the fog of all this, there's this empire building project, which is like Greater Israel on steroids in a way. Shaul Majid, a Jewish studies professor at Harvard Divinity School, told MintPress. The definition of Greater Israel varies, but generally it refers to the state of Israel expanding its territory to include what proponents consider the historic land of Israel according to the Bible. Some define this as having Israeli sovereignty from the Mediterranean Sea to the occupied West Bank, and sometimes the Sinai Peninsula and occupied Golan Heights. Some attribute the term to envision it expanding from the Euphrates to the Nile rivers, which we've talked about, correct? So, Mount Hermon will either be permanently or formally occupied in the sense that will be considered sovereign Israeli territory. Palestinian Dutch analyst Moon Rabbani told MintPress News. Rabbani explained, however, that from this state's perspective, capturing this fertile, water-rich area is less about ideology, but rather about exerting pressure. Israel has seized the highest peak in Syria, which is very valuable for military intelligence purposes. Rabbani said the main reason it's being done is not so much ideological, territorial expansion, Greater Israel, and so on, but primarily in order to establish Israeli hegemony in the Middle East, and particularly deceive Israeli influence over what happens next in Syria. So the Yuri Tzahn movement was established to commemorate Yisrael Sokol, an Israeli soldier killed in Gaza in January 2024. Sokol advocated for settlements in the besieged Gaza Strip, but also dreamed of conquering Lebanon. Even when he went to fight the enemy in Gaza and take possession of the Gaza Strip, he knew that the entire war in the south was only a prelude to the great war in the north. Yuri Tzahn website reads, he saw the Gaza war in the shadow of the approaching Lebanon war, and both in the shadow of the Temple Mount. His family even engraved the following on his tombstone. I saw you, Gaza, in the shade of the cedars of Lebanon. So, yeah, just, you know, what did we talk about last time? Manifest Destiny and all that?
Yep.
So, following his death, Amos Azaria, a professor at Ariel University located in the Israeli settlement of Ariel, visited Sokol's family and, through their discussions, decided to found the Yuri Tzahn movement in Sokol's honor. Nechala was founded by Rabbi Moshe Levinger, a leader in Gush Emunim, Block of the Faithful, a messianic Jewish movement promoting the settlement of the Palestinian territories occupied in 1967. Prominent settler activist Daniela Weiss now leads the movement. The organization made headlines in 2021 for establishing that Avatar outpost of the northern West Bank, and in the wake of Israelis' war on Gaza, has found a new target, resettling Gaza. Now, we've talked about Weiss plenty before, so not a great lady. While Yuri Tzahn is listed in Israeli registers of association, the organization hasn't filed any financial documents given how new it is. According to a review by MintPress, Yuri Tzahn hasn't led any donation campaigns except for crowdfunding a children's book encouraging Jewish settlement in southern Lebanon. So here's one of these little settlements that they're popping up, right? Couple of tents claimed in southern Lebanon, but where there are tents, there will soon be buildings and military outposts. And, you know, this is essentially them taking land and is illegal, as said by plenty of organizations. So, on the other hand, Nechala is funded in a myriad of ways. The settlement movement receives money through its financial arm, Galuim Tetnu La'aretz. In English, the land shall be redeemed, a registered nonprofit in Israel's Register of Associations, though its public benefit company, Hakupa Halumat. Do I need to read the whole Torah today? What are we doing? Lebenyan Aretz Israel or the National Fund for the Building of the Land of Israel, and through donations on crowdfunding websites Charity and Peach. Galua Tenutz La'aretz hasn't filed annual reports with the Israeli Registrar since 2021, when it received NIS $709,000, approximately $196,000 in domestic donations. I would imagine that's Israeli currency. According to its recent filings, Hakupa Halumet Hebinyan Eretz Yisrael received nearly $91,000 in 2022, with almost 40% coming from abroad. On charity, donations can be made to Siono Nes Vedegel, an organization promoting Jewish settlement. According to its Israeli Register page, it raised nearly $1 million in donations in 2023. The name refers to a Zionist pioneering song from the early days of the Jewish settlement of Palestine, Bear Your Banner to Zion. While little is known about Zion and Nes Vedegel, it does share an address and phone number with Gula Tenut La'aretz. MintPress News contacted Charity and Peach on why it allows campaigns advocating for Jewish settlement in occupied territory, which is against international law, on its platforms, but did not receive a response by the time of publication. Yuri Tzafon and Nachala also did not respond to MintPress's news request for an interview. A week after Assad's fall in Syria, Israeli government approved plans to expand Israeli settlements in the occupied Golan Heights, which Israel seized during the 1967 Six-Day War. Netanyahu said he wants to double the settler population in the Golan, which currently has a settler population of approximately 30,000, concentrated in 35 settlements. While settlement expansion in the Golan Heights has received significant support from Israeli parliament, so too has the idea of settling Syrian land beyond the Golan. The state of Israel must seize a security belt across the new jihadist regime in Syria that will include the Mount Hermon and a significant area close to the border. Israeli parliamentary member Savat Sakat said the political and military price is probably lower than ever. The security benefit is enormous. So, on X, Israel's Diaspora Affairs Minister Ameche Chikli, who was a member of Netanyahu's Likud party, wrote, Israel must urgently renew its control over the peak of Mount Hermon and establish a new defense line based on the 1974 ceasefire line. Jihadists must not be allowed to establish themselves near our communities. So, again, this is pretty much saying the Amchai Chiklai, right? Here's the lines he's talking about. But in June, at Yuri Tzafon's first Lebanon conference, Dr. Haggai Ben Artzi, Netanyahu's brother-in-law and Uri Tzafon member, told participants that Israeli borders should be expanded to include Syria, according to what was promised in the Bible. So just all of Syria. We don't want even 1 meter beyond the Euphrates River. We are humble, but what we were promised, we must conquer, Ben Artzi said. Humble my ass. Southern Lebanon and southern Syria has long been part of the Zionist vision of a Jewish state. In fact, Zionist leaders were in conversation with the United Kingdom and France to include these areas while working to establish a state. They said they need these lands to absorb hundreds of thousands of Jews from all over the world, Nazar Ayub, founder and director of Al-Masad, an Arab Rights Center in the Golan Heights, told MintPress News. Southern Lebanon and southern Syria are very crucial for the future state of Israel. Al-Masad researcher Dr. Nazeh Brick pointed out that military control often serves as a prelude to eventual Israeli settlements, just as it's done in the West Bank and Golan Heights. Most of the settlements began as a military base, and then it becomes a civilian settlement. Local Syrian sources say Israel has expanded beyond the buffer zone to occupy the villages of Arab al-Sudi, Shabrak, Shiyun, Nofa, and the east of the town of Sayada. Israeli forces also taken control of Syrian water sources, including the Saharan al-Jaloun Dam. Taking control of the water supply is part of the settlement strategy, Ayub explained. Israel won't leave the new occupation area, Ayub said. They need new settlers to control the land and the water, so they need a new settler power to continue controlling the area. And with Yuri, Safan, and Nechala, they already have Israelis ready to take up that mantle. So I brought this. This was shared by Eva Bartlett, who's sharing Dr. Zaid Mustafa, quoting this lady right here. My children have not found anything to eat for 2 days. I just want a loaf of bread. The situation of this Syrian woman is like the situation of 80% of the Syrian people who were fired from their jobs and their money was frozen. Their home belongings were stolen. This is the situation of families and children of those who were arrested 3 months ago. The worst situation is for those who were killed and the families were left without the slightest means of life. They were left to the unknown. So Eva quote cheats with this response. The situation of 80% of the Syrian people who were fired from their jobs, their money was frozen, their home belongings were stolen. So the countries of the world have been cracking our heads with democracy and human rights. Leave the terrorist Al-Jawlani and gangs that steal, kill, and arrest under the eyes of international systems and UN organizations, while the people are killed without justification and their property is stolen. In addition to the crimes, martial law, and field executions, families and children were left without a breadwinner, without food, without medicine, even water. And now Israel's beginning to control that. So 80% of the Syrian people are detained under house arrest in their homes without food, medicine, or personal freedom. And if they go out, they are killed under false pretenses and ready-made charge to be sent to you under the protection of terrorist security. How are the patients then? How are those with chronic diseases, old age diseases, cancer diseases, etc.? After all the health clinics and medical centers in the countryside, villages and cities were robbed and taken to the city of Idlib, the stronghold of Al-Jawlani. A little bit of humanity and a lot of concern for the Syrian people, security and safety are the basis of the demands. So Eva calling out what she sees. She says, please pay attention to a very important matter. Do not send aid to Al-Jawlani's government because it steals aid, especially what was sent before, which is now sold on the sidewalks and shops and malls. The poor classes do not have money after the father who was feeding them was arrested and the father and mother who were providing food for the children were fired from their jobs. Syria is being swept by the epidemic of terrorism and famine. Save the Syrian coast, Homs, Hama, and all the Syrian cities. So, any questions before I move on, Care Bear?
No. Well, you mentioned it. I talked about Manifest Destiny 2.0.
Yeah.
Well, the idea of Trump. And again, it's not the idea really in terms of the physical taking over, but more of the mental aspect of that. You know, is the belief that you being the like you're owed this land or fill in the blank or whatever you want to call it. But in this case, yeah, you are owed this land. Like this is your God-given right to take it over and it's yours, but to the detriment of people who are already there. So we talked about this last week in regards to Trump seemingly you know, like he's kind of talking about in terms of like taking over Greenland and then like Canada and like renaming the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America, and some other bullshit like that. But what's not being talked about is how the US, via proxy of Israel, you know, we've talked about the Great Israel Plan ad nauseum already.
Mm-hmm.
Like this, and this is the thing that no one is talking about, especially in this way. And this is what I say to people: like, if you have an issue, you know about. If you went to school, if you did any high school history, providing that you didn't sleep during the class, you know about Manifest Destiny. So if you had a problem with that, seemingly in the cause of what happened to Native Americans and also to Black people, you should have a problem with this too, because this is almost verbatim, like exactly what was done to the Native Americans hundreds of years ago, like in real time. But because it's not happening on our soil, that is easier to ignore. So, but it's the same shit. Just, a different people group this time. Well, not really, but proxy of another people group that are committing this too. I think I sent you in Discord because I saw Richard Medhurst post this earlier. I didn't read the whole thing, but when I saw it, like now, like seeing it now because this would kind of remind me of that tweet. Like he, of him being Syrian descent. Like this is, and I'm sure he's saying this out knowing him out of anger, but almost like frustration. But he tweeted, "Syria's dead. I washed my hands of it. And people with no respect for their land, the land that birthed civilization, don't deserve it. Enjoy being Israel's bitch." Like it. It just kind of shows. And I think just talking more in terms of whatever leadership remains in Syria, just how they've just kind of keeled over to Israel and and
by design,
like not fighting for it, like
by design,
right?
So a U.S. terrorist group decides to come in, take over Syria right at the time Israel decides it wants to take half of your land, and you do nothing about it. Definitely some issues. So, but Dave DeCamp over in Anti-War writes, Netanyahu says Israel won't allow Syrian forces south of Damascus. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared on Sunday that Israel wouldn't allow any Syrian forces to be in areas south of Damascus and said the Israeli occupation of southern Syria would continue for an unlimited period of time. Take note, we will not allow HTS forces or the new Syrian army to enter the area south of Damascus, Netanyahu said, referring to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the al-Qaeda offshoot that took power in Damascus following the regime change that ousted Bashir al-Assad. We demand the complete demilitarization of southern Syria and the provinces of Quneitra, Daara, and Suwaida from the forces of the new regime. Likewise, we will not tolerate any threat to the Druze community in southern Syria, Netanyahu added in comments he made while speaking at the ceremony for graduating IDF combat officers. Following the downfall of Assad, which Netanyahu celebrated and took credit for, Israel invaded southern Syria and captured a buffer zone between the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights and the rest of Syria. Israeli forces have also pushed into territory in Syria's Quneitra and Daara governance and are now establishing 9 permanent military outposts. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz also said on Sunday that the Israeli occupation of southern Syria would continue for, quote, an indefinite period of time to protect our communities and thwart any threat. During his speech, Netanyahu also threatened to restart the genocidal war on Gaza amid a fragile hostile deal, saying Israel was ready to return at any moment to intensive combat. The operational plans are ready. What does that tell you? So, another friend of the show, Robert Inlakesh, Syrians protest in Damascus against Israel's occupation of the south, death rather than humiliation. The demonstrators chant as Israel has begun their project to occupy the south of Syria while it bombs Damascus at will. So far, there has been no action taken against Israel. So, here they are right here. You can see him walking down the street. So, pretty brave of them, I think, at this point in time. Breaking, huge Israeli assault on Syria. Dozens of casualties reported so far. Israeli forces have bombed Damascus and different sites in the south while invading Daara, ordering the Syrian civilian population to flee. flee. Jesus, English. Ethnic cleansing of Syrians. No response from HTS. So, yeah, I mean, HTS doesn't look like they're doing anything against Israel. So that should tell you a lot. So here's the actual bombing. Well, I thought I had it in here, but Israel is heavily bombing Syria's capital city of Damascus right now. There's no justification for this criminal aggression, just pure terror inflicted on Syrian families in the middle of the night. So, closing thoughts? Like, not good. I want to pull up a map real quick while you're doing that. But
I mean, what more needs to be said at this point? It's the Great Israel Project at work. And no one's necessarily making the connection of what's going on. So I have no words because I've said them all already. We've said it all already.
Yeah.
So what more needs to be said at this point?
So here's Damascus, right? So we were talking about everything south of this, right? So here's Mount Hermon. Let me back it out a little. Come on. So, and I guess this is the border, right? So nothing south of that.
Right.
So that's from like here down. Here's Al Zawada, right? You're talking about literally they invaded that. Trying to look at where else if we see any other ones that were talked about. But they're bombing Damascus. So we'll see how that goes. But and I think if I can find Idlib, is where like Jolani is. So here's Homs. Aleppo's up here. Idlib's way up here. Right? So I imagine Israel's just going to walk right up there at this point. So I don't see why they, the issue is Lebanon. Right? So, that's going to be a problem. But essentially, this is now giving them all this land to me, Yeah. So I'd like to be proven wrong, but that means that Lebanon's now in a lot of trouble. Jordan's probably in a lot of trouble. So I prep yourself for some more terrible news from the region. So unfortunately, but anyway, talking about these things is why we're demonetized. You can go to ko-fi.com/indienewsnetwork, scan that QR code on your screen, or, it's always in the description below. We appreciate any monetary support you can give us, but we get it. Times are tough. Money's tight. We'd rather you like and subscribe, hit the share button, leave a comment. Let us know what you think's happening in Syria. We'd like to hear your opinions.
Or otherwise, were you aware of what's happening in Syria? That's a better question.
That too. Make sure to subscribe. Otherwise, thanks for watching.